joining us today to our 5th talkBD event. I'm really pleased to be hosting today on behalf of CREST.BD. And today we're going to be talking about sleep during the time of coronavirus. For many people, myself included, sleep hasn't always come easy during this time. So today we'll be talking about why it's particularly important for people with bipolar disorder to maintain good sleep and share some tips and strategies about how you can do that. We have two founding members from CREST.BD on the line with me today. From my old home in Australia, Professor Greg Murray, and the always wonderful Victoria Maxwell. So wherever you're joining us from today, welcome. I'll quickly introduce myself first. I'm joining you from sunny, today, mainland Vancouver. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the University of British Columbia. I study quality of life in mood disorders and digital health tools. In the past, I've worked as a psychologist in Australia, and I've been with the CREST.BD team since 2015. In my spare time, I like to dabble with creative hobbies to support my own quality of life, whether that's drawing or crochet. And lately I've had to add running to my list of hobbies because my husband's quarantine hobby is baking lots and lots of sweet things that nobody else but me can eat. So I'll now pass the mic to Greg Murray to introduce himself.
Hi guys, it's great to be here on this talkBD event. I'm a professor of clinical psychology in Australia, and I'm the director of the Centre for Mental Health at Swinburne University of Technology, and Emma Morton was my PhD student, and that shows what a good supervisor I am. I've been with CREST.BD since the very start and have enjoyed the road as CREST.BD has developed. My particular research interest is, in fact, today's topic, is sleep and circadian rhythms in bipolar disorder. And you might be able to see in the room that I'm in a couple of drum kits. So my first career was as a drummer, and that's literally why I became interested in those 24-hour cycles that are so important to well-being. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to having a chat about some of those issues and how they're playing out at the moment. Over to Victoria.
Hi, I'm Victoria Maxwell, and I've been with CREST as a peer researcher since the beginning, since 2007, and have really enjoyed my time too. On the other time that when I'm working, I'm a mental health speaker with lived experience. I have bipolar disorder and generalized anxiety disorder and psychosis, temporal lobe epilepsy, disordered eating, all that sort of stuff, and have been living well with bipolar disorder for a number of years, thankfully. And I also do mental health coaching and keynote speaking at conferences. And on my spare time, I'm thrilled to hear that you are running now, Emma. I'm an avid runner, an avid slow runner, but a runner nonetheless. And also, I guess something else is that I'm writing a memoir about my own experience with bipolar disorder and the intersection with spirituality. And I'm really enjoying that. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you both. I'm really excited to have you both on the line with me today. If you're new, if this is your first talkBD event, this is something that we've been running once every couple of weeks as a way to help support people adapt their self-management practices to what has been quite a trying and disruptive time for a lot of people. CREST.BD is a Canadian research organisation. We're dedicated to advancing research and knowledge translation for people with bipolar disorder. And the way that we conduct our research is by working hand in hand with people with lived experience of bipolar disorder to make sure that we touch on research that is important to areas valued by people who live with this condition. And we make sure that we try to make those findings accessible to everyone. So clinicians and people who are living with bipolar disorder and their family and supports. And we have lots of international partners like Greg and Spectrum, who were on last week. So we're Canadian based, but distributed all over the world. So before we begin, I have a couple of little housekeeping points. Today we have people joining us by Zoom as well as the Facebook live stream. And so we're taking questions in a number of ways. People have submitted anonymous questions beforehand via the CREST.BD website. And you can also type your questions into the Zoom Q&A box, or you can pop them into the Facebook live stream, and Laura will make sure they get to the team. So with that, I will hand it over to Greg.
Okay, so the way that I think today's going to work is as Emma said, we really want this to be a sort of dialogue and a coming together as an opportunity for support. But we have a particular topic, and so I'm going to just say 2 or 3 introductory things really about this topic, just to set the scene and get us started. So what is it about COVID-19 and this unusual time we're going through that might be particularly challenging for sleep? Well, the answer to that question is really a feature of sleep that not everyone is perhaps fully conscious of, though I have noticed that over the last couple of months, there has been more and more recognition of this in the media generally. And the feature of sleep I'm talking about is the fact that we sleep not just because we're tired, but we also sleep because our body clock tells us it's time to sleep. This is one of my absolute favorite ideas in the whole world. So Emma might need to interrupt me if I keep talking for the next 25 minutes. Yeah, okay. But it is a fascinating feature of all living things on the planet, not just humans, but cats and daisies and elephants and literally everything, that the organism has decided that the change from light to dark that happens every 24 hours is so important, which it is when you think about it, such a dramatic change, that we can't react to it, we have to predict it. And the biological mechanism that does that for us is called the circadian system. And in human beings, this genuine clock sits in the brain about 5 centimeters from where I'm pointing now, deep at the base of the brain. And in terms of our experience of this thing, this clock, we don't notice it most of the time because it basically just ticks away and drives waking up and going to sleep. The only time we notice it really is with jet lag, where we notice the tension between the fact that we may have been traveling all day and we get to the hotel and lie down in the bed, but even though we're exhausted, we don't sleep. And that's because as far as the body clock is concerned, we're on a different time zone and it's not time to sleep. So that's one of the few times we actually notice it. So what's that got to do with COVID and the social isolation or lockdown that we've all been experiencing? Well, even though this clock is a genuine clock, it's ticking away there all the time in a molecular way that we understand pretty well. This clock also likes to take in information from the environment every day. We say it likes to be synchronized with the environment every day. And if the clock is not receiving regular information from the environment about when the sun has come up, it starts to get a bit shaky. And one of the problems with social isolation is many of us have lost very major daily routines, whether it be going to work, getting the coffee from the nice woman at the bakery, whether it be going for a social event or going to study. Most of us have built in behaviors across the day that do this job of telling the body clock what time of day it is. And locked up at home, there is a very real chance that we will start to get up at different times of day, be exposed to sunlight at different times of day, go to bed at different times of day. So we lose those routines. And that is a threat to our sleep quality, and consequently our mood. So this is why, you know, we're particularly interested in what's going on at the moment in terms of challenges for people with bipolar disorder and their sleep. We're in fact collecting data at the moment from a large multinational study where we actually have surveyed people right now during COVID and have confirmed exactly what I've just described, that people are experiencing less routines now, correlated with the fact that they're experiencing less daily routine, they're sleeping worse, and correlated with both those things is their mood is struggling a bit. So there's more depression around for people with bipolar disorder and people with also unipolar depression at the moment. So that's exactly what we predicted based on theory.
And Greg, I just wanted to just jump in and just sort of validate that I've noticed myself that as I've gotten out of a routine, I was really good in the beginning. Like, I was like, okay, I'm going to get up at 7 o'clock and this is all great. And I was doing it for at least, 2 weeks even. And that was, good. And I would get up for my run. And then as work started to peter out and all this, and so I didn't have those demands that really forced me to get up, I sort of became a little bit more lax about it. And then started to go to bed later and sleep later. And then I was sleeping longer, which for me, when I sleep longer, is usually a sign that I'm moving into depression. And so I had to sort of rejig it, and I'm still, now I have a routine. It's not what it used to be. I used to go to bed very early and get up really early, but now I've got this set routine, and I'm doing sort of going for a run in the morning, taking my dog out, having breakfast, and trying to stay within a sort of an hour range. And I notice my mood sort of slowly increasing again, but it's certainly, I would be right on track with what you found in all the studies that you're doing, or the study that you just talked about.
Thanks for that. That's exactly what we're finding. But you've also pointed out another thing that we've been finding, which I wasn't sure which way it would go. We found a very strong correlation between length of sleep and depressive symptoms. So in bipolar disorder, it's complicated, right? Because sometimes people have decreased need for sleep, sometimes they have insomnia, sometimes they have increased need for sleep, and the symptoms can go up or down. It's a complicated, so we weren't sure what to predict. But the strongest association between sleep and mood that we're seeing is that longer sleep is associated with having lowered mood. So exactly what you just described. So that's why we think COVID is particularly challenging and important to pay attention to for sleep in bipolar disorder. And just to say a couple of things, is this okay, Emma? Can I go on a little bit longer?
Absolutely.
Just to say a couple more things about the importance of sleep in bipolar disorder. So we do, most people know that changes in sleep are literally part of the diagnosis of bipolar disorder. So a manic episode is defined on the basis of changes in sleep, typically decreased need for sleep, but also insomnia. And a depressive episode is also defined in terms of changes in sleep, which can go either way. Again, people can have difficulty sleeping or they can sleep more. So it's intrinsic to the diagnosis. But the thing that Alison Harvey, who's one of the big researchers in this area, has been pursuing for a long time and really confirmed in lots of different studies, is that the sleep problems persist for people with bipolar disorder outside episodes. So this is just part of the lifestyle of someone with a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. Something like 70% of people with bipolar disorder report really very significant sleep problems, even when they're not ill with episodes of mood disorder. And that's a very significant quality of life challenge, which is why in the quality of life BD instrument, the survey instrument that Erin and I and CREST.BD built a long time ago now, sleep is one of the domains, because it's not just a symptom of the disorder, it's also part of the quality of life challenge of living with bipolar disorder. And then just one final thing before I wind up. I suppose the other really important thing to say is, you know, we're describing sleep as a challenge and a problem for people with bipolar disorder. But the good news is there are also treatments and ways that people can self-manage their sleep. And I suppose I'm hoping that today is an opportunity for us to talk about some of the things that work and benefit people. Victoria's already spoken clearly about the things that work for her, and they're really important tips, but we might hear other things as well today. But yeah, I suppose, you know, the take-home message is there are things we can do, and many people with experience, you know, long experience of bipolar disorder have worked out what works for them in terms of managing their sleep. And there are lots of things we can do that we've learned both from the science and from the self-reports of people living with bipolar disorder about what might be useful. I'm done.
And were you speaking about some of the other kinds of models of treatment? Were you speaking to that?
So I can talk a bit more about cognitive behavioural therapy for insomnia, for example. Is that what you're referring to, Victoria?
Yeah, I wasn't sure.
Yeah. So I just conscious of the time, and I'm not sure. It seems like I've been talking a lot.
No, we're all good. This is important stuff.
Okay, so in terms of the evidence for improving sleep in bipolar disorder, many people will have heard of cognitive behavioural therapy, which is a behavioural and cognitive therapy that is used for all the mental disorders and mental challenges that people have, psychological challenges. And it's also useful for treating the symptoms, the mood symptoms of bipolar disorder, and also good for preventing relapse in bipolar disorder. Cognitive behavioural therapy for insomnia is the first line treatment for insomnia, and insomnia is the most common sleep problem. And so, not surprisingly, people have put those two ideas together. CBT works for bipolar disorder, CBT works for insomnia, into the question, does CBT for insomnia improve sleep in bipolar disorder and improve mood in bipolar disorder? And indeed it does. So cognitive behavioural therapy for insomnia is a package of interventions which includes things like sleep hygiene, which is a concept that many people have heard of. It's a funny name, right? Sleep hygiene. It literally originated when people thought that keeping your bed clean was a very important aspect of improving your sleep, and which sounds funny until you look at my 20-year-old daughter, where her taking the food out of her bed is probably pretty important before she can get to sleep. That's a parenting challenge that I haven't quite succeeded at yet. So sleep hygiene refers to the conditions in which you sleep. So, you know, making sure the room is cool, dark, that you're not having coffee, you know, an hour before bed, though some people can, but most of us can't, that you're getting up at about the same time each day, sort of fairly common sense tips about the things you need to do to get a good night's sleep. But cognitive behavioural therapy adds on to that. It adds on the cognitive part, which includes, for example, unproductive beliefs about sleep. So many people who aren't habitually good sleepers, not surprisingly, develop some pretty unproductive beliefs about sleep that can in fact impair their sleep. So people who've had trouble sleeping before can end up with a belief something like, if I don't sleep well, tomorrow is screwed. Now that's a very unproductive way of thinking, especially as you're going to bed, right? Because it's sort of catastrophizing the outcomes of poor sleep. And so we, in cbt-i, cognitive behavioural therapy for insomnia, we pay attention to unproductive beliefs that people have about sleep. Another unproductive belief that people have about sleep is they have sort of romantic ideas of what sleep used to be like when they were a young person, a child or a teenager. You know, people say, I remember the first year uni, I would go to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning and sleep till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, completely oblivious to the world. I want to sleep like that. But of course, there are lots of things that have changed since you were in first year uni for most of us. And sleep is one of those things. We sleep less as we get older. We need less sleep, and we get more disrupted sleep as we get older. So that idea of being, completely oblivious, completely disconnected from the world for 8, 9, 10 hours is an unrealistic goal for most people. And we shouldn't be assessing our sleep against that goal. So there are a couple of things that are involved in cognitive behavioural therapy for insomnia. Perhaps as we go on, we'll also get the chance to mention some particular things we need to be a bit careful of when it comes to using cbt-i for bipolar disorder, because there's a couple of things we need to be careful of.
Those are all really great tips. Victoria, did you want to share a little bit about any of those strategies that you've used and been particularly helpful from your perspective? Oh, you're just muted.
Thanks. I'm usually really good at that. Sleep hygiene is probably been one of the most important things. And I won't make the same joke I usually do about dirty sleep versus clean sleep. Just not worth it, right? And it's sort of common sense, but it's not always common practice. And I'm finding in this sort of shelter in place time, it's even more difficult because there's in some ways, some people are working more, but my job I've been working less. And I had a reoccurrence with depression and anxiety. And I find when I'm in the midst of a depression or anxiety, it's even harder to stay motivated to put these structures in place. So for me, it's the one thing that I do find that I can do each time, but it doesn't always happen at the same time, is sort of the order of my sleep routine for cues for myself. So I know that I change into my jammies. I have like a really favorite house coat. I know I always have a book that I'm going to read for a half hour. I almost do things in the same order, like how, floss my teeth, brush my teeth, take my medication, let the dog out, crawl into bed, read a book, turn out light. And so even if I'm not, so I have to be really sort of gentle and give myself some wiggle room when I'm not able to follow it. Let's say if I'm going to bed at 9:30 and want to turn my light out at 10:30, say, okay, I can turn my light at 11:30 or something, but still follow those cues. And those cues seem to really help. I use an eye mask and earplugs sometimes. Those are really helpful as well. So anything to minimize disruption. And then probably the most difficult part is around managing, and I was curious about this with CBT for insomnia, for bipolar disorder, is when you're sleeping too much, because that first hour when I wake up, it is so easy. I can have an argument in my head for an hour about why I should get up, why I'm not getting up, why I'd like to get up, why I can't get up. Like it just goes on, and I start to ruminate. And I'm sure there's sort of some CBT stuff for that and so I give myself an hour, so if I wake up at 7 and I'm having a lot of trouble getting up, it's like, okay, 8 o'clock. 3, 2, 1. Okay, it's 1 minute after 8. Okay, I've still done it. So so those are some, and congratulating myself on small wins, because for any of you in the audience right now who are in a depression or in mania, these things are really hard to put in place on your own sometimes.
Yeah, just to say a couple of things about that, Victoria. Thanks for providing those examples. It's always a challenge, isn't it, with behavior change. Let's take this example you just raised of getting up at the time you've sort of said would be good to get up, and we've just been saying how potentially useful it is to get up at about the same time each day. Actually, sorry, just let me underline that. you know, we were talking before about the body clock and how that daily routines is really important to help you sleep. There's actually quite a bit of evidence that the most important behavior that we need to make routine is the time you get up. So I said there are all sorts of things: the time you get up, the time you go to bed, when you have meals, when you socialize. It looks like the time you get up is the most important thing to keep routine across days, 7 days, not 5. And a window of, as you were saying, Victoria, 30 minutes to an hour, that's what we mean by stable. So given that, yes, you're absolutely, you're right, Victoria, that the challenge is, well, how do I get myself to do that? And what I really liked about the way you described it, Victoria, is you're kind of describing a gentle discipline. We can't be too harsh on ourselves, but we can't be too lenient on ourselves. It's walking that fine line, isn't it? And I know when I use the word routine, some people hear that as meaning rigid. It's not rigid. It's sometimes when I talk about this, I say it's the difference between a drum machine and a drummer.
Right.
We don't want a drum machine. It doesn't have to be like this. It has to be a good solid pulse. It needs to be predictable, but it needs to be flexible.
Yeah.
It needs to respond to what's going on. And so what you've just described, Victoria, I think is a good example of that sort of nudging yourself in the right direction and trying as much as possible to stay within the window and not beating yourself up on days that it doesn't happen, and just getting back on the horse and saying, no, it is a good idea, or I'll try again. How can I problem solve this? What might help me tomorrow? So in terms of the sorts of things that help people with that particular challenge of staying in bed and finding it hard to get up in the mornings, there are a few things that we can suggest. One of the things that helps is if you are actually seeing daylight early in the morning. And I know you said, Victoria, which is a very good idea, that you often use an eye mask and earplugs. Now that's great for getting asleep and staying asleep.
Yeah.
But we ideally, we will start then in the morning to give cues to the body that the day has started. So if you're near a window and can, when your first alarm goes off and can flick open the blinds and start to get those cues that the day has started. So light is, probably the most important cue, but also other sort of social triggers that the day has started. So a lot of people will, turn on the radio. So there's actually dynamic human interaction rather than perhaps checking your email, which is the habit for many of us, which is more of a passive sort of thing. If you can connect up to real-time things that are going on in the world, that cues that, the day has started and maybe I want to join it.
Mm-hmm.
So those sort of things happen. I've had a few.
We've got lots of questions coming in thick and fast, so I'll just give you a moment.
Okay, so just to finish that, and I'm sure people will be talking about these strategies, which is brilliant. One of the things that some people choose to do is actually set up multiple alarm clocks, so that there's one that they actually have to get up to turn off. But that's an extreme measure.
That's what I was going to say, is that I know some people where they put it sort of on the other side of the room, and there's actually an alarm clock that will fall apart when it goes off, and the only way that you can turn it off is by putting it together. So that I have not used that, and I won't, but just for any of you who are hardcore, that you could try it out, Google falling apart.
I think that falls more on the discipline spectrum of the gentle discipline that we're aiming for. Thank you both for sharing that background about why sleep is important and what we can do. So as I said, we do have a bunch of questions coming in. We suspected this would be a really interesting and engaging topic. So the first one that we've had is, can stress and lack of sleep bring on a manic episode? Or is it a symptom that lets us know that we're already experiencing a bout of mania?
Victoria, do you want to have a go at this one?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, I can't say with any scientific sort of research, but I'd say it can be both. So for myself, if I'm sleeping less and under stress, it can, the lack of sleep can be a symptom of mania and an indication that something is coming on. But I also recognize that if I continue to have a lack of sleep and the stress levels remain the same, it can definitely exacerbate whatever mood symptom I'm experiencing. So it can either exacerbate the mania that I might be going into, or it can exacerbate a mixed state, which I often am in, where it's depression and anxiety. So to me, that sleep and exercise have been the two real pillars for me to maintain in order to stabilize my mood, to get it to sort of some kind of baseline. And it's something that I feel like I may not always be able to get right, in quotes, right, because there is no perfect or right, but it's something that I have more control over than, say, circumstances around me.
Yeah, and the research would back you up entirely on that, Victoria. The sleep matters, whether it's the sort of a predictor of a manic episode, or it's part of the slide into mania, or it's part of hypomania or mixed state. In a way, it doesn't matter. What we know is that sleep matters, and if stress is impairing your sleep, then getting on top of that sleep issue is really important. And as you say, Victoria, it's an area where we do have some control, perhaps. You know, the stress, if it's to do with problems at work or problems in a relationship or whatever, it might be more difficult. We might have less control over that than we do our sleep routines. And so, yeah, I'd agree with you. Let's just focus on that, whether it's a cause of an episode or part of an episode. It doesn't really matter that much.
Yeah. And dealing with both of them at the same time. So the things that I can't control about maybe the stress in terms of other people's behaviors, but how I'm dealing with it. So going to counseling or therapy or just talking to a friend about it can help decrease that stress, that makes it easier to find my good sleep pattern.
Yeah, I like what Greg said about regardless of the exact relationship that's occurring there, we know sleep is really important. So the next question, a person has asked, I take more naps, anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours in the day since the lockdown. I generally feel better on days that I take naps, but I'm not sure if that's because of the naps themselves or just being able to take better care of myself at home. Have naps been scientifically proven to help with bipolar disorder?
I heard the word science. I heard the word science. They haven't been scientifically, thank you for that really interesting question. They haven't been scientifically proven to help with bipolar disorder. No one's done, to my knowledge, any research specifically on naps. You raise a really interesting question. And I kind of need to ask you another question back, unfortunately. There's no problem with napping, and if naps make you feel better immediately afterwards, and days on which you nap tend to be better mood days, that's all sounding good. From a sleep at night perspective, of course, we're a little bit concerned that naps in the daytime might make it harder for you to sleep at night. So assuming that it's not, if you're still sleeping well at night and your personal evidence is that the naps are working for you, then that sounds great. In theory, a 2-hour nap in the daytime is I would be not recommending that in theory, because that's a big chunk of sleep, and it means you're getting right down potentially into the deeper stages of sleep. And normally we say, for sleep problems at night, if you have to nap because you're overwhelmed with tiredness, keep them short, so you just get the sort of refreshing aspect of a nap, say 20 minutes, around that sort of duration, without getting into those deep phases of sleep. That's what we normally say as part of sleep hygiene, is to minimize naps, make them short, and make them early in the day. But if your experience is that you can have these naps, they make you feel better, you're not groggy after them, and they're not impairing sleep at night, then it sounds like it's working for you.
Yeah, I'll just jump in really quickly. Is that one of the things I found is that there's times when, even though it doesn't make sense that naps, in quotes, should be working for me, they are, because it's a way that I'm really being kind to myself and taking care of myself and doing self-soothing acts. And so that's one thing that I've noticed, is that doing really comforting things during around this time sometimes supersede all the rationale behind why I shouldn't take naps. And I think it's harkens back to what you were saying, Greg, about that balance between, it's not about rigidity, it's about flowing with, the evidence that you're finding and what probably needs to happen as well. So I think it's a really good question. I think a lot of people wonder about that.
Thank you. This question is, I think, one that probably a lot of people are unfortunately experiencing at this time. I lost my job due to COVID-19, and I don't think I'll ever get that job back. I go to bed late because I'm afraid of having bad dreams. And when I wake up, I'm filled with anxiety. I eat sugar when I wake up in the middle of the night, and I have no idea why. How am I ever going to get a good night's rest?
I'm sorry to hear that. That's a really tough situation to be in. In phases of my life where the sleep has gone off and the dreams are bad and the future is looking bleak, that's a very, very tough spot to be in. And it's not just the sleep that's the problem there, is it? There's a sort of sense of being a bit out of control and very anxious about the future, and part of that anxiety is entirely realistic, but probably if you're not sleeping well, there's also some anxiety catastrophizing overlay on that. So it's a mixture of realistic concerns and probably very pessimistic thinking as well. So that's a very understandable cycle that you're in, where a major life stressor has thrown off that comfortable cycle of withdrawing into sleep at night and functioning in a motivated way in the daytime. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. It seems a bit, given that challenge, it seems a bit superficial to start to talk about what you can do to improve your sleep. But the general principles, if we're focusing on the sleep aspect of what's going on, one of the things that's we do know is important is, for people who are sleeping badly, let's leave the bad dreams aside. For people who are sleeping badly, one of the primary things that we know can be part of the driver of that is that they're bringing worries from the day into the nighttime. And, people always laugh when I say, try not to worry about this, because, it's so obviously a challenge to not worry about the future. But in fact, after 20 years or so as a psychologist and 62 years as a worrying person, I know that there are things you can do to minimize the habit of worrying. And one of the most important things you can do is to not open up questions about what's the future going to be like? What am I going to do about what if? Not open up those questions after the sun goes down. One of the things that most reliably disturbs sleep is starting to think about problems in life in the evening, and especially in bed. And there are very good reasons why that's a bad time to think about those things. So one of the standard things we do in cbt-i is train people up to address their problems or think about them. If they want to worry about things, is actually set aside a time to do that thinking and even worrying, but make sure that happens in the daytime, not close to sleep. That is, we draw a line and we say, I will not be thinking about my employment prospects anymore today. I'm done with that. I will use distraction, I will watch Netflix, I will do self-soothing things, I will engage, I will look after myself, I will comfort myself during that evening time. If I want to worry or plan or problem solve, that has to happen earlier in the day. It can't happen once the sun's gone down, and it definitely can't happen in bed. So look, that's just one idea. And as I say, it feels a bit superficial to be even talking in those simple terms about that challenge, because it's a tough one. But that's one thing that I would predict would be useful. Victoria?
Yeah, I just want to say my heart goes out to you. You're not alone. I know I've experienced sort of loss, and a lot of people around job and other things as well. And so I feel like the most important thing has been, and we seem to come back to this in each of these sessions, is about self-compassion, because it, for me anyway, because I've been experiencing something very similar around difficulty sleeping and anxiety and fear and all those kinds of things. And they affect the quality of sleep. Even if I'm sleeping a long time, the quality of sleep varies. And that being able to bring self-compassion allows me to also give myself a little bit of room to be neurotic. And I'm calling myself neurotic because I see my patterns with bipolar disorder heightened in this time that's so unique and so stressful. And so Kristen Neff and Tara Brach have some really good podcasts and meditations. They're not part of necessarily problem solving, but they're part of self-soothing. And I find that when I can actually contact that part of me that is self-soothing and is compassionate towards myself, even a little bit, and if those words don't work, whatever words are more appropriate for you, for me, sometimes just the word softening helps. It allows me to actually be more effective in my problem solving. And it allows me to even have the feelings come up that sometimes can be preventing me from falling asleep. And sometimes I need to talk to a friend about how to access that kind of self-compassion, because when I can speak for myself, when I'm feeling all of the sort of those really negative catastrophizing and pessimistic thoughts, I can be very judgmental of the way that I'm being, because I think I know better than this, I've been living with this for a long time. And so talking to a friend often helps. So I don't know, those two resources, Kristen Neff and Tara Brach, are really good for finding meditations, and they really give some science behind self-compassion and some quick exercises as well. And I think probably Laura can put that into the, yeah, she's already done it. Mm-hmm. She's put it in the chat. So yeah. And just on the sugar note, I totally get it. I have been buying far more and baking far more desserts than I have ever done, not just because I have more time. And I think there's something about the whole self-medicating, and I've done that with food and sugar. So if it's possible to let go of the judgment, that's more than what I do too.
I also want to offer thanks to the question asker for sharing their experiences in this time, and to our hosts for obviously it's a very big question, for trying to offer some compassionate suggestions about how to manage that. And on the note of self-compassion, all of our previous talkBD sessions are still available to view online, and Victoria and Erin Mahalik and myself talk a lot about self-compassion and responding to those feelings of anxiety in the first two of those sessions. This will probably have to be our last question due to time, but it's come up for a couple of people, so it seems pretty important. Is there any evidence to recommend melatonin tablets to try to regulate sleep?
Short answer, yes. Melatonin has two properties that are relevant to this discussion. Firstly, melatonin is slightly soporific, that is, it encourages you to fall asleep. But the other feature of melatonin is it's one of those signals we were talking about that the body clock likes. It's a marker of darkness. And so for those of us who are stuck inside most of the day, we're not getting as much variation in light and dark as our body clock would like. A melatonin tablet taken an hour or two before planned bedtime provides that sort of pulse across days that helps the body clock stay in sync. So yeah, there's a bunch of evidence that melatonin works in that way.
And I can't speak, I have not taken melatonin, so I can't really speak to that.
If that one was a quick answer, we might have time for one more. This one will have to be your shortest, snappiest answer. What are your thoughts on sleep hypnosis? The question asker has said, I think it's the speaker's voice being monotone, nearly meditative. It seems my brain can listen or ruminate, but not both at the same time. Is there any research on this?
I've never heard of sleep hypnosis, I'm sorry. In my normal habit would be now to Google it. So if Victoria, have you heard of sleep hypnosis? So I can Google it.
I mean, there's two things that I've thought of is that there's hypnosis for sleep so that you learn a certain thing so that it allows you to fall asleep more easily. So you learn cues. I don't know what science basis it is, but then also that there's a sort of different meditation apps and tapes, or not tapes, but apps and recordings, even one that's where it's boring stories. I don't know what the actual website is, to help you go to sleep. And so I know that there's anecdotal evidence for sure around that. And I find that like music has been very helpful, and different kinds of relaxation, progressive relaxation exercises are helpful.
Yeah, I've just Googled it. It is that sort of thing. So yes, there's lots of evidence that distraction, and as the questioner put it, you know, it's hard for your mind to listen to a discussion and ruminate. So it's a great distraction tool to have an engaging conversation going on in your head that isn't the stuff your own head is generating. And hypnosis, on my understanding, would be one version of that, and music falls under the same heading, as also does, you know, classic meditation techniques of listening to your own breathing, for example. The thing of getting out of your head, you know, your thoughts at night, especially if you're lying in bed trying to get to sleep, tend to be very destructive. A friend of mine described it as if I start thinking when I wake up in the middle of the night, it's like opening the kitchen drawer and choosing which sharp knife to use. It's a really bad time to be trusting your own thoughts. And anything that gets you out of your head tends to be useful in getting to sleep. Listening to your own breathing, the sound that your breathing makes, is a very powerful technique, which works very similarly to listening to music, listening to the radio, listening to boring conversations. or a guided meditation, hypnosis type thing. They're all, I think, working through a similar process of getting you out of your head. And those things do work. They're not like a silver bullet, but many people find they've learnt over time that, yes, if I'm not sleeping well, this is a strategy that tends to work. It's worth a try for me.
Thank you both for that one, and for sharing your expertise on all of these different strategies that we can try. I've also personally appreciated the little refresher course, as I think many people will. And thank you to everyone who asked a question. Apologies if we didn't get around to it in time, but we also have lots of resources available on the CREST.BD BD Wellness Centre about sleep, so hopefully we'll drop that in the chat as well for you. Victoria's shared some of her tips for getting the sleep that you need and want in more detail in one of our blog posts, so you can also visit there. And we have some videos showing those sleep tips in action from Victoria. So she's our resident expert on the lived experience of sleeping well. I would highly recommend both. We've had lots of really positive feedback about those. We also have the quality of life tool on the BD-Qual website. This is a place where you can measure your quality of life both in sleep and across a range of other areas that we know are important to well-being for people who live with bipolar disorder. And this can be really useful for checking in, seeing how you're going, and getting linked into tips and resources. We also have our academic CREST.BD website, and this is where you can stay in the loop about the research projects that we're currently conducting, including Bipolar Bridges, which is supporting the development of a digital health tool to improve well-being in bipolar disorder. One of the other projects is from Greg's team, which is looking at, like you said earlier, the impact of COVID-19 on daily routines. So we're interested in having people with, I believe, unipolar and bipolar disorder participate. Greg, do you want to speak a little to that?
Yeah, so it's the topic we've been talking about all day is what has been the impact on your daily routines of COVID and isolation, and how does that relate to your moods and your sleep? We've got something like 500 people from around the world have responded already, and yeah, we would love to hear your experience. There's also open questions in the survey where we're sort of trying to tap people's tips and tricks for what's working and what's not working for them around those challenges. So yeah, it's an opportunity to contribute things that you think might be useful for other people in terms of managing sleep during this time.
Great, thank you. And the other survey that we've got going on at the moment is about the kinds of apps that people use to support their well-being when living with bipolar disorder, as well as if you happen to be a clinician who works with people with bipolar disorder, whether there's any particular apps that you recommend people use. We know that digital tools are really starting to become central, especially in the current time where people may not be able to access their usual supports. So we really want to tap into your knowledge about what works. Whether there's a particular sleep or meditation app that you're using, please visit our survey and tell us about it. Our next event is going to be focusing on ways to cope with depression, particularly during this time. And that is going to run on May 27th in Melbourne, May 26th if you're in North America, at 5 p.m. And you can register for that on the talkBD website. You can also submit questions for future events. And you can view the recordings of previous talkBD sessions there as well. We'd like to extend a warm thank you to those who are funding our work and all of our partner organisations who have helped out with these events. And if you'd like to stay up to date with our work or the work of our partner organisations, you can follow us on social media. And we are really interested in your feedback about these events. We have a survey link on the talkBD website. This is really important to help us make sure that they run even better. And it's also a place where you can tell us about what other topics you'd like to hear about, what else is important to your self-management, particularly at this time. So once again, thank you so much to everyone who attended. shared questions, and to our presenters, Greg and Victoria, for sharing their expertise. Until next time, everyone, please stay healthy and well.
Thanks so much. Stay
See
well.
ya.
Bye.
Bye.